two-point perspective is possibly the most common way we draw architecture. I thought I'd talk you through it without those little boxes on straight line horizons, but with something that's a little more realistic. In fact, it's a building I drew yesterday looking straight on, but I had this photo I also took of a two-point perspective view, and I thought that would make both an interesting change for me and for anyone else to draw, having already paid attention to the front facade, and as well as an opportunity to talk through perspective and what it means and how it looks in the two-point version. Now, buildings are said to be in two-point perspective because they have two vanishing points, one off to each side. And in between those two directions of perspective angles, as I think of them, we have a corner of the building. And depending on the angle of the corner of the building to us, or the angle with which we're viewing it, the angles of each side of the building will go. If we're looking at one side, which is more front on than the other side, as in this case, which is the left-hand side, then the angles aren't going to be as steep and the vanishing point will be further away. But if we're looking at an angle that's moving away from us, a side that's moving away from us at a greater angle, then those angles, those perspective angles, are going to end up being steeper, sharper at their most extreme. And that vanishing point will be closer. So that's the right-hand side of this facade. And I'm starting, as you can see, with that closest front corner, because this is where I try and draw enough, accurately enough, spending more time than I will probably on any other part of the drawing, even though it's offered a relatively simple shape, to get the proportions correct. Now, the other thing with two-point perspective I want to pay attention to at the very start, and I did this at the very start, was to work out where is eye level? Where was the level of the viewer or the camera? And in this case, it's, I think, a fraction below the bottom of the lower windows. So there's basically a straight line across there, and as all the horizontal lines move up the building, the angles increase slightly each one. Never be tempted to just draw them parallel. The angles actually increase, and once we start to see that, once we know it's there, and so we take the time to find it being there in our reference photos, it comes to be something we don't even need to think about. We know it's there, and we can see it more easily, and then we can add it into our drawing to get that extra sense of realism. So now, mind you, if I'm looking at a corner of a building at 45 degrees, then the angle on each side of the building is going to be the same, and therefore the perspective angles will be the same on each side, and the vanishing points will be the same distance from that center corner. Notice with this bare tree here, or semi-bare tree because it was the start of winter, notice I draw the bare branches in first before I draw the building behind. Even though I'm drawing the building at the moment, I actually need to stop doing that and to draw anything that comes in front of the building so that I can create marks for the building to help it sit behind, and running branches over the top of what's behind, even if that's sort of what we see in the reference, in our drawing doesn't work with the same clarity, and it just ends up being a tangle. I love to introduce as much of a sense of depth of 3 dimensions into my drawings as possible, and having objects that very clearly are closer to us than others is a great way of doing that. And if you look at that tree now and how it works, having drawn the building behind it and not quite touching it, then you can work out whether it's an effective system or not. I'm using a 0.2 millimeter Copic pen. This pen is getting a bit dry, and that makes it a bit irregular in the ink that flows out. And that can be frustrating, but it can also give a wonderful opportunity to explore almost a new medium and different effects and it tends to blob a little bit now at the start of my lines, but I quite like that often, and so I'm using it deliberately, knowing that it does do this because I like the slightly rougher feel that it gives to the overall drawing. So we found eye level, it's just below the windows and it's on the lowest windows, and it's the same across the entire scene because the eye level is the same for everything that's been seen by the one viewer, by the one camera. And so now I'm pushing up. Now, one of the things about two-point perspective is because we're looking at from a side angle, it really accentuates, or it really gives a chance to see all depth lines that go into the building. Wherever there are recesses going back or protrusions coming forward on our building facade, we see the thickness of those because of the angle, at least on one side of the element. Therefore, two-point perspective architecture is something we really want to work hard to see where the depths that we see from this viewing position are, and to take advantage of putting them into our drawing, not just to give a sense of 3 dimensions, but also a sense of interest as well. If you're finding this interesting and enjoying watching the drawing, then please hit the like button for me right now. That would really help me. And leave a comment with your thoughts. And you're watching this being drawn at 3 times my real drawing speed. So I've now turned the corner, so to speak, and I'm now replicating the same things on the other side. That makes it a little bit easier in some ways, a bit dangerous in other ways, because the angle is steeper on this right-hand side, and therefore the view is different. The foreshortening, the narrowing of objects as they move further away from us, and moving down the front of a building angled like this is moving away from us, even if it's not moving. The different elements narrow. So these windows are narrower than the ones on the left-hand side, but the ones I'm going to draw on the other side of the entranceway, which are the same size, further down this right-hand side, they're going to be even narrower again. So this is really important if we want to create a sense of realism in our scene. So I've slowed down a little bit because I've got to work out how to punch out this porch and keep everything accurate. And so to delay doing that, I realized that I've not added this window after I put a bit more of the tree in. So I think I'll do that because that's something I can do easily and without risk. Drawing freehand in pen, there's always a risk. We may, in the end, put marks where we don't want them, and perhaps even some of them are not going to be in a place where we can do much about that. But I still find drawing freehand in ink a wonderful adventure. And we do learn our own ways to put marks on the paper to position our observation, to get a sense of where an angle might go to without the commitment of a line. We learn to draw less rather than more early, because we don't want too much on the paper before we're sure of where to put it. And I find that's really wonderful. It's been a great thing to have happened from drawing freehand in ink. Because then when I do draw my lines, the ones that are going to define important elements of the architecture, I can be much more confident in doing them. And so I think I get visually a more pleasant, a more pleasing line. So one of the challenges, I think maybe one of the biggest challenges of drawing streetscapes is actually the ground level, because it is so complicated. Now, it's really tempting to leave everything out so that there's nothing at all in front of our building, so that we can just basically draw a straight line across the bottom. But when we do that, we create a streetscape that very seldom exists in life. And again, if we want to create a sense of realism, we need to put all the visual clutter, and that's often what it is, or at least enough of it to make a point. Now, I'm all for the artist choosing what to draw from a reference. We don't need to put every sign, every park bench, every garbage bin, every bollard, every parked car, every lamppost that's in our reference or in front of us in our scene. But if we leave all of them out, it does end up looking very artificial. So at first I wasn't going to put this street pole in, and then I thought, well, why not? So I did. But you can see I had to put it in before I could commit to what was behind it, which means it's not in exactly the same spot, because while I put the street pole in the street light pole in the place that I thought was most accurate, I'm not going to align the detail behind with the position of the street light pole. I'm going to align the detail behind with the architecture I've already drawn and the sense of foreshortening that's happening. So now just working around this pole so I don't draw a line through it. Nothing's more annoying than when we've created a space early so we don't draw lines through it, and then we draw lines through it in a moment of carelessness, a moment of distraction. So now just again trying to work out a little bit slower with this, because I've got arches and whatnot that I haven't had before in this drawing yet, and when I drew them yesterday they did look a bit different. Plus also trying to work out for the fact of this light pole not being exactly in the same place with the detail behind in the reference as well. But it's important to do, I think, enough things at street level. And then there's the challenge of, well, how do I draw all this clutter, so many things, and keep the scale correct? And I find that the most important thing is to start with the largest objects, the architecture, but not to start at street level. I'm not sure I've ever started at street level. Often it's easier to draw an upper floor without any or without much street clutter in front of it, and then to move down, because we have a sense of where the building's going to be and where the clutter, whether it's people or cars or whatever, are going to be. We can stop the architecture safely before we get to that place, position the top and the bottom of that object, and then we can draw it in, or at least draw in enough that the architecture can come down to it. If it's a row of parked cars, maybe I just draw the roofs of the car, if that's in fact the upper part of the vehicle, and then draw the lines of the building down to that point. But all the time drawing the closer thing before the further back thing when I get to a particular location. Now, doing this roofs can be a bit tricky. I pay particular attention to where things such as the apex are. You'll see all those lines I've drawn, and that's because I'm aligning. And my drawing's done. Sorry, it did finish a bit quickly there, didn't it? I turned the camera off to have a stretch and then forgot to put it back on. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you enjoy this little foray into two-point perspective. I hope you like this building. I think it's a great building, a New South Wales Country City Hall, Town Hall. And of course, this view of it is also on my channel community page if you'd like to have a go. So why not? But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, however many points of perspective there are, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.